Hello from the shores of Lake Titicaca. And, even though every time I say that, I hear Principal Skinner's voice in my head, this is still one of those places that I never thought I'd get to. Like, it's too far out of my usual dimension. I mean, this is the creation point. This is the birthplace of the sun. And it does have an incredible feel already. And we're here obviously because tomorrow and the next day we will be spending on Isla del Sol, and that will be, I think, the last of the Infinity Stones I came to South America to collect before World War III. But that's not what I want to talk about today in this solo show. I want to talk about how to get good at magic. So if you're part of the listening team rather than the visual team, don't worry, I'm literally just sitting on the balcony of my hotel. Although I will say, it's kind of giving Lady Gaga paparazzi, but on a budget. But yes, this is very much an audio first episode. So let's jump on into it. Let's jump on into how to get good at magic, the Bolivian edition, I suppose. And before we jump into those details, speaking of getting good at magic, I want to announce the next couple of courses because we've changed a little bit about how the membership votes. So the course that starts next month is the next Grimoire course. We haven't done one of them in years. And I'm jokingly calling it the Jake Edit in reference to Jake Stratton Kent because it is a deep exploration of one of the things that maybe the biggest thing that I would say he contributed to the changes in Western magic in the 21st century, which is the centering of the Greek inheritance or within the grimoires. So it's actually called Grimoires, the Greek inheritance, brackets, the Jake Edit. But I've done, most of that's done, most of the actual research and laying out, and it is going to be fucking fantastic, if I may say so myself. And so this is one to join for, let me tell you. Getting back to grimoires, getting back to looking at how those Greek survivals are made bioavailable to us via the grimoires and so on. So yes, that's coming up next month. It's starting next month. And then for the second half of the year, we did a change in how the voting works. And so for the second half of the year, we're going to do another 6-month course like we did for the foundations last year, which this episode is called How to Get Good at Magic. Step 1 is the foundations. But we're going to do the blended cycle model. So if you've listened to the astrology episodes with Austin, or if you've just been around at all, really, you'll know that I have I'm going to call it right now, a system of predictive metaphysics or metaphysical prediction that combines Western astrology with about 6 or 7 different predictive and cyclical modalities. And that's longer than a normal course. And so we're going to be doing that over a 6-month chunk of time, but realistically the course is going to be about 4.5 months, right? And so that's the second half of the year. So if you've been looking to upskill in the face of the World War III that I've been saying has been coming the entire decade, and now everyone else has worked out using things like the blended cycle model, join us and join us to find out how you surf that particular wave with the Grimoire course. So those are the kind of magical announcements for this episode. But I want to talk about how one gets good at magic, and based on my experience here in Bolivia. So I've done a bunch of stuff, magically speaking, since I've been here. So I just finished up an overnight Washuma or San Pedro ceremony in the Andes south of La Paz. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. But the other kind of main thing that I've done is I spent a week up in the high Andes with one of the, I would say, if not the most potent practicing Medico Kayawaya operating today, a guy called Mario. He's in his late 70s. Now, the Kayawaya are a ethnic group But they are also, the word has become synonymous with, in particular, a kind of plant healer, but a magical person whose skills and ability have descended in an unbroken line since before the time of the Inca. In my interview with Mario, he says that the Kayawaya predate the Incas. They were actually the midwives of the Incas. And for context, we say Inca in reference to the civilization. Inca means king. So we talk about the Incas as a people, but it means king. So in that sense, they were the wizards to the king. And after the fall of the Inca Empire, they basically moved into the mountains and the valleys, where I went and stayed with them. And why that's interesting, I suppose, from a how to get good at magic perspective, is you can either be born into the Kayawayas, or this is so simple, but it's a precise kind of obvious. You have to do a lot of magic to get good at magic. And here I am in Copacabana, which is the town on the shores of the lake that you get the boat from to get to Isla del Sol. And it's not just a holiday town. There's a beautiful church dedicated to the Virgin of Copacabana. And people will come from as far away as Chile when they buy a new car to have it blessed. And that's kind of what I mean by you have to do a lot of magic. One of the things that is delightful about Bolivia is everyone's doing magic. That's magic, right? Driving from Chile or La Paz or wherever to get your new car blessed. And I use the word new advisedly, and I'm one to talk. My fucking truck's 20 years old. That's magic. But they will also do that in the context of providing offerings to the mountains. So driving into the mountains with Mario last week, as we got to the highest point, he wound the window down because he was in the back. I was driving. That was hair-raising at the fourth police check. Goodness, Bolivia's totalitarian. Which is at about 4,600 meters. The car wouldn't start. And the thing is, we were playing fast and loose with the rental car rules, which is my friend and translator Julian was doing most of the mountain driving, and I was doing the city driving. So, but whenever we'd roll into the police checks, we'd have to switcheroo, and I'd get in the seat because it's in my name and blah, blah, blah. And it just wouldn't start. And the sun had just gone down, and we were in the middle of fucking nowhere. Anyway, that's not the point. The point was, when we got to the highest point, he wound down the window and sprayed like his own Agua Florida offering mix, like out of a little spray bottle out the window. And as we were coming over some similarly high hills yesterday on our way to Tiwanaku, we saw the car in front of us do the same thing. So it was the highest hill, obviously, on their journey, and they'd wound down the windows, and they were flinging liquid offerings onto the ground as they went by. And this is one of those observations, those anthropological observations that, like, the more magic a culture does, the more magic you can find in it, the more it works, and so on. So the obvious answer of how to get good at magic is to do more of it. And this is my movement into, I guess we're about a third of the way through the Sigil a Day project. I did actually manage to, I'm still about 15 behind, but I did actually manage to send off about 10 of them yesterday. I still got this big bank of them to go. I am going to Isla del Sol for ceremony, so I'm not sure. That's been my challenge here, has been that I've been in ceremonial situations where it hasn't felt quite right. Like I was doing a mountaintop despacho ceremony with Mario last week. And on the one hand, that's a really good place to do it in theory, but until you get there and go, this isn't right. I'm just gonna let Mario obviously take the lead on this. And I've been in situations where mine hasn't been the biggest pointy hat in the circle, and that's taken up a lot of my time here. So that's been the other challenge in getting a bunch of them off. I feel like it's going to be the same in Isla del Sol. I'm not sure, because I'm there to do some specific ceremonies. So what I wanted to share, because I put a video out a couple of days ago at the time of recording this, which was the full technicals on how to technically do a sigil, because we kind of touched on it on the live stream that launched Sigil a Day But most of that was to do with desire surfacing, which is still the most important part of the sigil process and the most important long-term uplift that comes from doing it. And one of my biggest, there's been two technical learnings so far in the project for me that I think are worth sharing. And the first one I briefly mentioned before was the desire cross-current. So to want certain things and then want other things was generating interference. And one of the things that I did to solve for that, because like 365 is a lot. One of the things we do in that course and in the wealth magic course is focus a lot on desire, because we're not that good, which is so strange in a hyper-capitalist world of knowing how to want, of how to desire. And it's because that whole, I mean, we can even get neurological with it, but that whole reward system in the brain has been hijacked by, let's call it capitalism, let's call it advertising, whatever you want to call it, let's call it hypersexualization and pornography, all true, right? So even though we have access to, in theory, easier and more fecund and abundant sources of desire fulfillment, it's fucking worse, all right? Like the whole system is fried. So, and then you layer in the psychological upbringing, particularly for women, I would say, but not necessarily where, well, particularly for women when it comes to sex stuff, obviously, because there's our culture, no culture, as far as I can tell, maybe some Polynesians, but our culture is not particularly supportive of women's exploration of physical desire, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So the desire stuff is super, super important. And as a result, like in January and early February, I'm firing off different sigils, and there was some cross currents. And it wasn't because I wanted one thing, like I want 5 children and I want no children or something. It wasn't complete nullification so much as wanting certain things without specifying time limits, stuff for the farm versus stuff for travel, like here I am collecting infinity stones and so on, was generating cross currents. And my soul for that was to spend a couple of days of sigil credits, if you will, saying or having statements, all my sigils manifest smoothly, all my sigils manifest for the highest good of all, that kind of stuff. So I did about 3, those 2, and there was another one. I used the word no sigils counteract. It was something like that, but it wasn't that. That's kind of negative, but you get what I mean. But I used 3 sigil credits, give or take, in a row. Honestly, all my sigils manifest smoothly, all my sigils manifest for the highest good of all is going to be enough to do it. But that was super interesting because I'd never done magic at a, when I say that, I'd never done practical enchantment at this high volume, which is the whole fucking point of the exercise, right? I'd never done them at this high volume. And that was the big kind of like steep, there was the big bump at the middle of, or rather the beginning of this process. There's another one as we're now here in this final, like, well, final third to the middle part of this process that I'll talk about in a minute. But the other thing is, once you get over that and once you let them become smooth, I've moved into a bit more of that loosey-goosey phase. So I'm going to give you some examples. I've written them all down of sigils that if you're playing along, or even if you're not, like, you can start now, you can just use any of these. But these are a whole bunch of statements of sigils that I've put out in the last couple of weeks, which I think might, well, I'm going to share them in case they're of use to you. So the first one, lower world gifts. Next one is get better at filming every day. That's me specific at the moment, right? Like, I guess that makes sense. You would have worked that out. The obstacle is the way. Happy healing spirits. Commander of angels, and this one's a bit weird, like titles of gods and angels from grimoires. So Sabaoth, for instance, as a sigil that name. Be still and know that I am God. Safe travel by sea. Powerful body. I thought about that from like a healthy body perspective. I like powerful body. Like I've done a bunch of healing stuff with sigils as well, but there's no age where you don't want your body to be able to express power, right? Like everyone knows that from like a retaining muscle as you age, etc., etc. So that's what that one's about. Portals, literally just portals. The next one, portals to a happier timeline. I mean, why the fuck not? Feeling is the secret, and that's a Neville Goddard reference that will come up again later in this episode. But those are the kind of things. I really like lower world gifts. And by the way, I ended up finding a couple of crystals that are Bolivia specific. It's beautiful, actually. It's a cross between amethyst and citron. The next day after that one. And in some of the shamanic healing work I do, the underworld looks like almost like Gimli's glittering caves in a lot of cases, like the crystals are from there and so on. So that was an interesting thing that was useful. But lower world gifts is, I guess, a more shamanic way of talking about, shadow work and so on. Those are some examples that you can use directly or as inspiration for your own, because I don't know, some of you might be running on desired tank fumes, you never know. And we're always going to get to this point. And I want these to be able to transform into new and exciting opportunities to do more sigils as they land on the timeline, like the portals to a new timeline as we get closer and closer to World War III, etc., right? So that's kind of where I'm at with sigil creation and the first thing that I learned. The other learning that I think has been useful, and I've got my Lenormand cards with me here, my Fortune Swirls Lenormand cards, is if you're going to do this with tarot, it's just that I'm on an oracle card kick, as you know from the last video. And again, which is to say I don't deeply love tarot, it just is what it is. If you're going to do this with tarot, I would recommend going trumps only for it. But there's a couple of ways you can implement oracle cards as a method of engaging, well, with pretty much any enchantment, frankly. But I'm going to use it in the context of doing high volumes of sigils, something like sigil a day. And the first one is to use them to inspire new statements. And an oracle card system is better for that, right? So you'd lay down 2 Lenormand cards, and it's the right Lenormand card that modifies the left Lenormand card. And you will use that to, so it might be ship and child. So that's like the beginning of a new journey. Or that's quite a good example, right? Because it's young, and turn that into a statement, turn that into a topic area, and so on. The other one, and this is something I realized is like a kissing cousin to what Mario was doing with the coca leaves, right? Because I put out a video, I wanted this episode, and it's linked up below. This one's going to be audio first or audio only. But I put out a video in La Paz, which is a full technical description about how you create sigils. And it wasn't really going to work as an audio version. And so this is kind of the companion audio version for that. And one of the things that I shared when I put that on the blog post was there is an overlap. It's not the same thing, but watching what Mario is doing with his despachos and his black mesas and his white mesas and using the coca leaves to determine what kind of healing process we will go through. And then, and this is the crucial bit, using coca leaves after the ceremony to make sure that the offering was accepted, or if something else needs to change or be added to it. This is another way. You can do this with any kind of enchantment. This is another way you can bring in something like oracle cards for high volume enchantments, which is to ascertain if certain goals that you have been sigiled for instance, have or are subject to cross currents or other interference. So I actually think we did this in the first Grimoire course. Once you have a relationship with a particular spirit, you can agree to have different modes of contact, like pendulums and we'll be doing more of this actually in the Jake edit, because I distinctly remember the time that the world lost him for about 2.5 weeks when he became obsessed with Jose Leitau's Cyprianic cartomants, and he ended up writing a little pamphlet thing for Haitian on it. But we were talking every day at the time, and it was really funny. Like, I'd get messages, I'd wake up and there'd be messages at 4 a.m. like he'd been up basically around the clock for 2 weeks. Anyway, So part of that will be folded back into the next Grimoire course. But even without it, you obviously all have decks that you are familiar with that can be useful in this situation to ascertain, are there any cross currents, or what else do I need to know, or what else do I need to contribute to the manifestation of this desire. Now, don't do that for every fucking sigil if you're doing sigil a day, obviously, but particularly on a, let's say, a project by project basis. So there'll be clusters of sigils towards, if you're looking to move, that's about 20 different sigils, right? From the right kind of real estate agent to, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So, but clustering in a project, on a project basis, that's very good intelligence, right? So, and that's one to talk to your own, unless you have a particular spirit for that, your own saints, angels, guides, and highest powers, to ascertain if anything else needs to be added, especially as if you're doing a practical enchantment a day, there's always more opportunity to bring some of them in. So that was it. So we've got cross currents, surprised me, but shouldn't have at the beginning of the process. Oracle cards has been useful and also a Bolivian learning. Like I felt, there's a weird way of saying it, I felt really validated watching Mario's use of coca leaves and cards. Like he also uses playing cards. I felt really validated because that's been part of my process. And here it is in like the hands of like the last of the great Kaiowaya or whatever. It's not the last, like the lineage is actually quite strong by, at least by my estimation, going up into the villages. Anyway, it's more that like, he's one of like the king wizards of La Paz, let's say. So allow that validation to flow through me to you, if that's part of your process. And if not, understand that it can be, because especially if people are maybe not at the beginning, but beginning to medium of like, okay, so I know magic works. I need further dialogue because I stand or sit in a state of cat-like readiness to support whatever these particular spirits or angels need to do to deliver it. But I'm not sure. Do I just like wait for it to happen or not? There are subsequent ways of seeing where the enchantment is at using oracle cards or tarot or coca leaves. You never know. I might be garnering a Bolivian audience that invites exploration into an area that can bring you that additional uplift. Like if you can get updates on what's going on or whether the offerings have been received or what else needs to be done, think about what you can do with that to actually elevate your results and bring them closer. So that's been one of the things that that's my Bolivia specific learning, I suppose, when it comes to how to get better at magic in general, but also with regards to sigils. The next one, and this is big, I think, for me anyway. Maybe many of you got there before I did. From a sigil canon perspective. So the shoaling thing and the robofish was, I guess, the major Rune Soup contribution to a update in sigil practice. At least 40 years or 100 years, whatever, like it just was. The thing that people haven't, maybe they haven't, you can tell me where I find it, done much work on is the fraught matter of forgetting, which is bringing the process all the way back to Austin Osman Spare. Now, I did some work in it, and I would actually say even that was part of the Rune Soup contribution, where I understand why Austin Osman Spare said you have to forget it, because his theory of mind, his model of like the unconscious and the subconscious, I prefer unconscious, but that's what he used, where if any of it was retained in the conscious, the subconscious wouldn't act on it, is not correct. And funnily enough, we know that from the weirdest places, like amnesia and brain damage and neurological conditions where people will can remember everything except their wife's name, or have full amnesia, but you can run them through, like rats, run them through mazes day after day, and they get better and better at it each day, even though they have no memory of what they've done, right? Like, so the divide between the conscious and the unconscious is arbitrary. And so my version of that was to operate on a low attention processing basis, which is there from Sigil's reboot on. And that's true. But there's something, I've been saying this for years. Sigil magic is like a more targeted or precise, which is only sometimes necessary, it must be said, activation of new thought manifestation techniques, right? And when we took, so if Austin Spare is wrong, this is a company I'm saying that, because he's literally one of my favorite artists, whatever. But if he's wrong which he is, in the model of conscious and subconscious, and you have to forget it and blah, 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 why? And I included this in the beginning of the process and in the last video and in chaos protocols and so on, getting to the end, and this is my update, getting to the end of a shoal activation and then say, does not matter, need not be, has worked really well for me. One of the things that I've been sitting with and playing with and kicking the tires on the daily, more or less daily, I'm traveling a lot, process, is, so what's really happening when we say, when we forget? Because there's a specific kind of forgetting that works. And this is where I think the most important overlap with New Thought is, and I will go further. I will say this is something that New Thought, in particular Neville Goddard, got better than magic. Certainly Austin Spare. And this is why I said at the beginning that feeling is the secret, right? Neville Goddard says, you get what you accept to be true. So why there's a specific kind of forgetting that works is that doing Neville Goddard work, so feeling is the secret. And in the prayer course we spoke about from a different angle, feeling is the prayer, is people can, let's say you're doing your manifestation for a new job or whatever, and you're feeling that intensely as you're doing whatever process it is, but then you come out of ceremony and your mind is situated permanently in the lack of job. So what Neville Goddard meant is you have to live entirely in the feeling of I have a job. And that is, or whatever it happens to be, that's better than forgetting. But it's why forgetting works, right? Because what Austin Spare was trying to do there is eliminate the desire for result. Because then, and this is exactly what Neville Goddard says, and other New Thought authors, right? But what you are putting out into the universe then is the desire, which is to say the lack, rather than the fulfillment. So I guess my biggest technical update so far is on the end of the sigil process, the fraught matter of forgetting. And I would say, funnily enough, to forget that entirely, to literally drop it and spend about 10 minutes, 15 minutes on YouTube, Neville Goddard, feeling is the secret, Neville Goddard feeling, Neville Goddard manifestation. There's an endless number of also run wannabe New Thought gurus out there with like 11-minute, 47 videos that you can grab. And if there's something in that for you, if that's alive for you, then please, for the love of God, get Mitch Horowitz's work or listen to the episodes, which I'm sure you have, with Mitch Horowitz that we've done on Neville Goddard in particular, but New Thought in general. Because in there is the secret to the right kind of forgetting. And it's especially important when you are doing high volume enchantment. But I would even say it's easier because you just have to do one and you're on to the next day. And you just have to do another one and you're on to the next day. So this is like the calisthenics that I've been working on from a magical perspective in this project now, is use this as an opportunity to get good at the back end of enchantment that people don't necessarily focus as much time on as they should, but you kind of have to if you're doing sigil a day. Just sit in the feeling, don't even think about it, but like the right kind of don't even think about it, which is to sit in the felt reality of the fulfillment of the results. And you have the rest of the year, if you're doing this project, to to explore how that expresses for you, because I do think something like that is one of those rare universals of magic. And it's to do with, and maybe this will come up in the it will come up in the blended cycle model course, actually. It's to do with consciousness and time. And sitting in the feeling of the results is a form of time magic, and it's an essential form of time magic, and I would say a universal. So you have 2/3 of the year, give or take. What do I say better than that? 3/5 of the year to have a play with that, because there are two ways, at least in this episode, of how you get good at magic. Do more of it, so sigil a day, obviously, and use this as an invitation to focus on the back end of magic. We focus on, and to some extent rightly so, but like we focus on getting the right ingredients and magical timing and all the front end stuff. But we don't focus on the aftercare. We don't focus as much on the necessary time magic that comes at the end. And that's the biggest technical unlock for me. Like the minor, it was almost like bumps at the beginning with the cross currents, but this has been the biggest technical unlock from a macro sigil metaphysics perspective for me, that the lust of results challenge is not just better framed, but better solved in new thought. So it's like you want to go in 3 steps. Step 1 and 2, magic, sigil magic, whatever. Step 3, new thought. You put them together. That's, for me, best practice sigils at the moment. And I'm really grateful for, I don't know, for the opportunity to be able to explore that, because it's the city that I didn't expect would come from doing this work, and I haven't got it yet, but I know I can see the direction that it is. The final thing, well, 2 final things, and this is related in its own way, and you could use this as a sigil statement as well. I did in January, I think, turning obstacles into opportunities, but if you can picture like a 3-circle Venn overlap it, on the left you can have magic, and in the middle you can have, which is say modern Western magic, and in the middle you can have new thought, and then the other Venn at the top triangle thing, we can have a hermeticism. Someone could probably meme this. One of the things that I think is probably objectively true, I can't believe I'm saying this, but one of the things that I think is probably objectively true about the universe is, and this is the hermetic component, that you are co-creating with God, that you are God in a body co-creating with God. And that's how the universe explores itself into what it needs to be next. Now, what that means is you are required by God to turn obstacles into opportunities. So every time something gets in your way, or seemingly, because actually Jung would say that's what God is, the stuff that gets in your way. You are required to make the universe better with the limited set of tools that God has placed before you, MacGyver style. So turning obstacles into opportunities is co-creation. So it's related in the sense that it's to do with consciousness and time and manifestation, but is also a source of philosophical insight, but also a source of sigil statements, right? But particularly as things don't come off, or even worse than not coming off, like, I got the opposite of what I want. I wanted more money, I got less. Fucking awesome. Cool. All right. Wallow for a second if you need to, and then jump into the turning obstacles into opportunities moment, and understand that God has placed this MacGyver episode in front of you with these rubber bands and this popsicle stick and whatever else. And you and God are creating reality from that moment. This is a really good, I would say, frame for enchanting out of particularly sticky messes. Because one of the things that will actually show up for you is like the places where you can undo the Gordian knot. So if you have enchanted for something that has gone, not just failed, but almost backfired, it's like, right, So I was pushing on the wrong door. What is the actual, like, what is the switch up that I need to do here? That's typically what happens, because it'll be something interpersonal. It'll be like, oh, I guess it's this. And that will have a macro effect in your life that is a net positive for the universe. This is literally how I think, and some of this is the experience of the jungle on ayahuasca, but it's literally what I think the universe is doing. I think it's exploring by turning obstacles into opportunities like that. And I don't just mean humans. I mean, that's what that co-creating through exploration of things that benignly do and don't work is literally what the jungle at night feels like on ayahuasca, where it's like the whole place is in this beautiful, seething, PG-rated orgy of just like enjoying each other's company and celebrating each other's expression, and things work and they don't work, and the things that work get the opportunity to do more of it until it doesn't work, and so on. I think that's what's going on. Like, that's what I mean by I think this is metaphysically true. And it has, bringing it down to sigil magic, a technical implication there, which is to turn obstacles into opportunities. So to sum up, cross currents, investigate if that's what's going on for you. I gave you a couple of solves. Oracle cards, in a wider sense of having ongoing engagement with your results. New thought replacing lust of results. And those two I want you to sit in the tension of, because, and I can't help, you'll just have to learn this the hard way. If you obsess over the results with the cards, you are failing the Neville Goddard feeling is the secret component. And I'm just going to leave that to you. That's your own journey. I can just tell you that. You have to deal with it yourself. And the final piece of the learnings from a third of the way through the project is turning obstacles into opportunities because of the co-creation of the world. And speaking of co-creating a better world, we will now jump to the lovely ladies at missingwitches.com, because last year, you may recall, they were on the show, and every May they do a fundraise for an Indigenous women's shelter in Canada, and the Rune Soup listenership did a wonderful job providing a whole bunch of lazy loonies, a whole bunch of Canadian dollars for that particular project. I will, of course, be donating myself this year, and I am also contributing a prize this year. So one of the prizes, I don't know the rest of them yet, but my contribution, I obviously know, will be a shamanic healing session for free. So that's $190 otherwise. But yes, I'm going to jump over to the lovely ladies now and have them tell you more about the project. And if you can, this is one of the things, why I like this one, I said this on the podcast with them last year, is that this is some of that nodal intervention that I was just talking about. Because for someone to end up in an Indigenous women's shelter, they have to have been subject to a upward cone of forces and impacts that we obviously stand opposed to here in every direction. And to be able to provide, to be able to make the universe better at that level has an outsized effect. So if you do have some and you would like to contribute, I'm going to hand you over to them now, and I'll see you in the next one.
You must be a witch.
Hi, Rune Soup listeners. It's Risa and Amy from the Missing Witches Project here to ask you for your support in our annual fundraiser for Native women's shelters.
Last year, we raised over $10,000, and the Rune Soup family made a huge impact. Y'all were instrumental in getting us to that number.
For this reparations project, we ask that you make a donation of $10 or more to your local Indigenous support organization or to the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal. For every $10, you'll receive one entry to win one of more than a dozen spectacular prizes. So if you donate $50, that's 5 entries. $100 is 10 entries.
So make your donation and send a screenshot of your receipt to missingwitches@gmail.com with the subject line reparations. This way, we never touch the money and you get to keep your tax receipt.
We got thousands of dollars worth of prizes already donated from true luminaries of the witch community, like Jinx Monsoon, Amanda Yates Garcia, Renee Sills from Embodied Astrology, your friend Gordon, and so many more.
Go to missingwitches.com for the full list of prizes and all the information you need to help us make a difference.
Thank you for joining in this joyful act of witch reparations. Thanks, Gordon, and bless the fucking bee.
Bless the fucking bee.
You must be a witch.